Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're watching or listening to this, and welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. My name is Lisa Kinski. I'm your producer and co-host, and joined as always by Francois Jeffrey. Francois, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon, Dr. Doolittle. I'm doing well. How about you?
Good. I'm in an aviary today. No, whenever this comes out, because there's always a break, I'm still house sitting for my friends who have an African gray parrot who is silent unless I'm talking. I swear. She thinks that we're having a conversation or something. And she likes to say her name. She asks for crackers. She was asking me for apples yesterday. She makes her dad's text tone noise.
Oh, wow.
She makes a hammering sound. She did something else funny the other day too. She
so
hustled
smart.
me. They're so smart. She hustled me out of a wheat thin yesterday because she was standing on her, I don't know, she's got these things in her cage, I don't know, but she was standing on this thing on one foot and making this weird cracking noise. And I was like, what's happening with you? What's going on? I don't understand. And then I've always been a dog mom, so I'm
or something.
Well, I've always been a dog mom, so I'm like, if a dog won't take a treat, they are not well. So I was like, has this bird done something to herself? So I go and get a wheat thin. The damn bird was mimicking eating a wheat thin and hustled me out of it because she held it with one foot and then made the same noise. I was like, oh, you're smart. And she knew what she was doing. She knew it. She was a smart little thing.
Yeah, they have like up to a 2,000 word vocabulary, I think,
something
right?
like that.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts.
What's crazier to me though isn't that they say everything in their voice. They she speaks in their grandfather's voice. It's crazy because they speak back in how they hear it. I don't know how it works, the science behind it at all, but I had to remind myself when I came here to stay. I was like, there's not a man in the house. It's just the bird. Because you have to remember that or you'll go crazy.
Yeah.
But how are you?
Good. I mean, the weather is great. We've had some amazing guests come on lately that I've been super pumped about, including the one that we have today.
I know. Well, how is the noise level? Because it's very quiet where you are, and you were thinking about maybe it was going to be too much to have her on. I said no. I said no. This has already been too long in the making.
They were they're repaving some of the, not potholes, but Pittsburgh is terrible when it comes to roads because there's so many hills and the weather's so crappy all year round, basically. So they're repairing a lot of the cracks and the corners and stuff. So they turned the corner, luckily. So now they're working on the opposite side of where I am. So we can't hear anything.
Fabulous.
But they it was quite loud about an hour ago.
Oh, man. Well, let's go ahead and bring on our highly anticipated, long-awaited guest that we were supposed to speak with, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Many times.
We've each had to reschedule. Today, our leader is Laura Meyer with Envision Horizons. Laura, welcome finally to the show. We're very happy to have you here.
It's great to be here. I finally have my voice back after getting COVID.
Oh, no.
Oh no, it's a part of life now.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah. I think we had to reschedule once. That was the day that you were sick too, Francois.
Yeah. Well, I think just everyone's been getting sick lately. A lot of people in our office, a lot of my friends.
Keep it on that side of the live stream.
I don't wish it on anyone. It's not fun at all.
I had big ugly COVID back in August, losing your taste and smell, hit by a dump truck COVID. It was not fun. It was my least favorite.
Yeah, it's done so many things aside from health, right? I mean, it's thrown off the entire world when it comes to supply chain and the way that consumers are buying things and the way that businesses are even looking at their inventory levels and how to make decisions. So that's why when I was looking more into your company, Laura, it seemed like you have a great solution for companies to be able to move fast in an environment that traditionally moves extremely slow. So I'm excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, definitely. And, on the topic of just supply chain disrupting a lot of things in the economy, I'll even go out on a limb and share that, we of the clients that we've lost this year, because churn is a natural thing in an agency,
Mm-hmm.
66% were because these brands didn't have the inventory to support the Amazon channel. So we
Wow.
have, we've felt it. I think that in a lot of cases, these brands can come back once their supply chain gets back in order, but there is that trickle up effect, not necessarily down, where these marketers in some cases are having to sit on their hands because budgets are going to be pulled back until there's the inventory to actually support the already existing demand for those products.
Mm-hmm.
And are you
Absolutely.
noticing at all with your clients that there's a gap between marketing and operations, particularly in supply chain?
And maybe before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
We'll just jump right into it all. Yeah. So a little bit about myself. So I'm from the Midwest originally, but I had moved to New York right out of college without a job. My parents were so proud.
Brave. That's just brave.
They were like, "You're doing what?" But actually, I was fortunate enough to land a job with Amazon's media group. That was actually like my first big girl job out of college. And I was very blessed to be a part of their, I think it's called the Account Associate Program, whatever it was. But it was basically like a 6-month intensive free training, almost like an MBA in Amazon. And then I worked for them selling their advertising solutions. I worked then for another ad tech company after that. And then about 5.5 years ago, I founded Envision Horizons to be a full service solution for businesses selling on Amazon. But I always knew that because I had seen firsthand these brands struggling with the operational side and the creative side of Amazon. And they always wanted to get that in order before they would give me their ad budgets, that there was an opportunity to start making all of these departments cohesive and in tandem so that their Amazon channels can be successful overall. So I knew that data was going to be a really big part of that. And communication is also a huge part of that as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
And so when it comes to data and communication, I guess, can we elaborate a little bit more on the challenges that you're seeing a lot of these businesses face in those two regards?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, there's the marketing planning and budgeting that is usually that sits in one silo, right? And then there's the actual inventory forecasting, which, as you mentioned, has been totally disrupted with supply chain, and product that was supposed to be here 3 months ago is still sitting on a ship somewhere in the middle of the ocean. And that completely disrupts then what the media plan should really be, whether this is for your own website or Amazon, really any omni-channel opportunity. And making sure that there's that relationship and that there is that communication between the operations team and the marketing team. And I think another big fault point that I've seen over the various businesses I've either consulted with or audited or actually worked with as clients is that a lot of times, especially in 2020 and 2021, the digital teams were really strapped thin. That the digital teams were really small compared to the size of business that they were managing, because these digital channels blew up so much in the last 2 years. And communication takes time, it takes focus. And if you are a brand manager, e-commerce manager, and you're running the D2C, you're running Amazon, you're running all these other channels, you're not going to even have the brain power and focus to then also have to collaborate with the operations team. So I know this is like a business fundamental, but a big part of it is just having the right people in the right seat who can then all work together cohesively.
Mm. And did you see that happening prior to the pandemic at all, or was it not much of an issue? Was it just because the pandemic brought on such an influx into e-commerce that these strains were formed?
Yeah, I mean, I think with any fast growing or emerging brand, there's always a case of a leaner organization. But I think that it was just really, really highlighted because I think another thing that happened in the last 18 months or almost 2 years now or 1 year actually, is also the Facebook iOS 14 update really disrupted digital marketers. And now they were having to figure out other incremental areas to spend their ad dollars to get back to the CAC, the cost of new customer acquisition, in order to be hitting this media plan that they had originally built and the efficiency goals that their finance teams had signed off on. So, there's been all of these curveballs and wild things happening. And I really feel for a lot of these e-commerce managers because like they need their fire hat on. Like they're just putting out fires all the time. And part of that struggle is also just keeping up with all the data because there's endless amounts of data that you can sort through. And it takes a lot of time, focus, and resources to find those actionable insights in the data that they're having to shift through while also juggling a lot of other fire drills that can come about.
I remember being in school and in math classes and stuff. They'd give you like all of these different numbers and these like data points, if you will. And they're like, okay, only pay attention to the ones that are relevant to the word problem. And it's like, well, that's great. You can easily tell what is associated. But when it's your business,
there's so much more noise.
There's so much more noise. Yeah, it feels like everything should be relevant because if it's being pulled from your ad account or your inventory or whatever the case may be, it's like, all right, well, it's for my business, so this all applies. I mean,
look, and I can't tell you how many times where I am in the audit phase with a brand and they're like, oh, well, we really want you to focus on telling us what the best practices would be to fix our advertising. And I start looking at the data and what they're doing on advertising is fine. The real issue lies in either their SEO or it lies in their operations and logistics. And then you start peeling back that onion and you're like, well, this originally looked like this type of scope of work, but actually that was just tip of the iceberg. And not that this is a Titanic reference, but there's more to be found in those situations.
And why is that happening? Are they not working together well enough cross-functionally to understand the different data points? Or is, I guess, where's this disconnect that you're seeing between the teams?
I mean, I think that, look, there's some organizations out there that have amazing operations that in my opinion, a lot of these really successful emerging brands that you see out there, it's because they had really, really solid operations first, and that they are also very data-centric companies. I think what's happened in marketing overall is really interesting because you think of the old school like Mad Men era. By the way, I love that show.
Great show.
Now I feel inspired to go rewatch it, but I don't have time for that. And marketing was very creative, right? It was how it made people feel and it was very subjective. And now marketers have to be on almost the other side of the spectrum of being very in the weeds, very data driven to decide how they're actually then going to appeal to some of these emotions that the consumers are feeling. So I think, there's a big part of just the communication between departments. Another big thing is working with a 3PL versus owning your own warehouse. Because I've seen situations where when brands have their own warehouse, things are, not surprisingly, a bit more seamless, and the deliveries get out, the operations are there. And some 3PLs are great. Other 3PLs, I also sympathize with them. Like, my dad owns a hardware store in Michigan, and finding the type of staff who's going to be working in these warehouses has been really, really hard for business owners. So I'm sure they've been in tough situations where there's a lot of demand for 3PLs to be helping these businesses, and they're working really hard just to recruit enough people to prep and pack the boxes required. So, but yeah, sometimes 3PLs can make it difficult, and I don't blame the 3PLs. It's just kind of the nature of the market right now.
Well, and each 3PL kind of has like their own specialty though, right? I mean, it's hard enough to like, know the qualifying questions to be sure that they're a right fit for your business. Like, they're not all built the same, I guess, is kind of what I'm trying to say. And finding that right partner is difficult. We've had a lot of conversations on even our show about how to find the right fit 3PL for your team. And I think that's why, there's these other solutions coming out too of like the peer-to-peer, like what we talked with
Kahoot. With Manish.
With Manish, yeah. And then we talked to Eddie about HubTub about it. We've been talking a lot about 3PLs lately.
But I think it's a great topic. I mean, I just anecdotally, I know of a CEO of a large brand where he spent almost a year vetting and interviewing 3PLs because like it had been a big pain point for their growth ambitions. And yeah, I mean, that's longer than now you have to interview employees and basically get an offer letter out in 2 weeks because the market is moving so fast.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah. And not only that, I do feel, and it's a big reason that we even have this show of sort of the knowledge that's out there, right? You definitely mentioned about the staffing issues that 3PLs run into, but looking more downstream, talking about carriers and the price increases that UPS and FedEx are putting on these 3PLs for the stickers. And not only that, but limiting how much they'll pick up during peak season. And the 3PLs needing to effectively relay that to every single one of their clients about, hey, you're shipping oversized items. FedEx is only allowing us to ship out 20 of these a day, and now we have to find a new solution. It's problem after problem after problem. I think COVID has done a really good job at sort of exposing these issues and exposing a lot of the growth limiters.
Yeah. Feels weird saying COVID's done a good job doing anything. I don't think we should give it that credit.
Well, I think it has. I think, I had a post on LinkedIn not too long ago about the supply chain bubble. And we talk about it all the time, how, it's everyone's relied on this just-in-time supply chain for years and built, amazing companies. But once one little issue comes up, that just tosses the entire supply chain sort of principles that they know out of the window, they don't know what to do next. And I think that's why these conversations are so important, because marketers at the same time have a lot of time very limited knowledge about what supply chain actually is and how that affects, their spend, how that affects where they could sell it, what channels are going to be most effective and what, partners they have.
That feels like a slight on marketers, and I really want to retort, but go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Laura.
But what I'll say with marketers too is, and this is something that we've seen as well, is that when inventory gets tight, now they're having to do profitability analyses to really only market, say, to their D2C, because they know their D2C, they get better margins than their Amazon account, for example. Or that they're going to maybe pull back on one of their retailers because the retailer really heckled them in the negotiations, so that they're probably, they'll then also pull advertising back on that account. And I think the name of the game moving forward as the e-commerce ecosystem, I think will forever be super fast paced, is you have to be nimble. You have to be willing to adjust. And as an agency, there's nothing I hate more than forecasts, because I see it as busy work. Like, I like to do things that are actually growing the business. I obviously appreciate the importance of it. I do forecasting for my own business, and planning is great. But when you obsess over the forecast versus obsessing over actually growing the business, then all you're doing, it's kind of like that corporate, the like typical corporate downfall of like, you're planning to plan a meeting that's going to plan to discuss another meeting, right?
Yep.
And then nothing gets done at the end of the day. And the brands that are, I think, going to be successful in this space are, they build their forecasts, but they're nimble with it. That if all of a sudden inventory drops on another product, they're then shifting budgets to their second bestseller, their third bestseller. Or if for some reason Amazon suspends their top seller, because that stuff does happen, they're able to migrate budget maybe to another channel until that's resolved. That it's become so complex. Like in many ways, all of these software solutions out there have eased the Amazon and just e-commerce management world, but it's also made it more complicated because there is more data. And when there's more data, there's more things that you could potentially be doing. And the list of things just gets longer and longer and longer. And by being nimble, you can start to choose like what is best to actually grow this business or move the business forward, rather than just steering the course of a plan that was written 6 months ago, which may no longer be relevant.
Yeah. And with all of the data, and it feels like it would be really easy to kind of look at all this data that you have and maybe go down not the wrong road, but maybe not the most growth-minded road. Like you can be doing a thing that maybe you're super interested in or you think is going to be really effective, but maybe not interpreting this other data set over here that would actually lead you to greatest success. I mean, how can these brands start to kind of devise what are the important numbers, and again, like you said, being nimble, being able to pivot, being able to, innovate and change, but like sitting down, okay, where do we go? Like, what is the data? Where do we go from here?
Yeah. And I think that's a big learning curve for a lot of founders, e-commerce managers, digital marketers, is all of this data is great, but what the heck do you do with it? What does it mean? I like to talk about it in the sense of like, there's one-dimensional data, which is just, that one data point of you had 1 million impressions this month. Okay, that's cool, but what does that really mean? And then like two-dimensional data points of like, you had 1 million impressions this month and you had 800,000 impressions last month. Okay, well, so now I know that there's this trend, right? And it's increasing. But what my business is really focused on is how can we have 3-dimensional insight? So here's the trends and being able to identify why this trend happened and what to do about it. So maybe your impressions grew because there was an increase in search volume for, like, let's say we have a client that sells jewelry. So Mother's Day was at the beginning of this month, and there was obviously a natural spike in their impressions and a lot of other data points because there was a seasonal lift for jewelry gifts leading up to Mother's Day. But what do you do? But like as a marketer, all of this is great, but what you actually need to know is, okay, what do I do with this? Like, do I bid up on my advertising? Do I start to launch or like tie products together? And that's what we're really working to solve with the software piece of our business. Like with our agency, we've been doing a lot of things manually, and we don't want our team to get lost in Amazon management. We want them to be able to work on Amazon management and grow those businesses. So we've actually created a rule-based algorithm of like, okay, what are the top things that impact sales and what are our internal processes or actions when we see these type of trends? And that we've started to incorporate into our software piece.
And how do you sort of define a trend? Is it, and it might be different for different data points, but is it over a certain period of time? Do you have certain frequency or check-ins to classify it as a trend?
Yeah, it's for me in a lot of cases, it really more so has to do with like the order volume as well, like the mass of how much data you're processing rather than just the time, although time is also important. And look, like we look at trends from a day-to-day period. We also look at trends of, okay, what did we do during this time period last year versus the same time period this year? And it also just really depends on the metrics, right? Like in the e-commerce and Amazon ecosystem, you have your inventory metrics, you have your, what I call like your general brand performance metrics like LTV, new to brand customer, your average order value, your repurchase rates. Because that's the other thing that I see sometimes too is marketers get really caught up in their Amazon ACost or ROAS. But in some cases, especially with consumable products, you can actually afford to have a higher ACost if your LTV and your repurchase rates are really strong. And it's, just being able to automate certain things so that you actually have the time to look at these data points and then make business decisions.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think particularly, do you see a lot of these companies starting to hire more data analysts versus, true marketers? When I think true marketer, I think like someone that is creating the creative and that's making content. But are you noticing that type of trend within these companies too?
So I've seen, especially like the Amazon aggregators, yeah, they're making those type of hires. Do I see D2C brands making data analyst hires? No, not really. But a lot of the software companies that are building solutions to then support these businesses, they, a lot of them have a ton of data analysts. And I think that will be a trend that will continue is these solutions companies that have data analysts are then building tools where it's more easily digestible what's going on so that a marketer can take it and run with it rather than, working maybe in a skill set that's not their strength, but is still kind of required to do a great job.
Now, when it comes to like trends, sorry, and I'm just thinking, you were saying like, obviously look at everything back 1 year, right? Because there's certain things that were just an anomaly. Like 2020 was just an anomaly as it is. And everybody kind of based their numbers back on 2019 and in 2021 at least. But I'm thinking with like these D2C brands and, some of these products, if they get picked up by like, if they're like on Oprah's list or something, or some, I don't know, some exciting.
Which, by the way, is a great thing
to get picked up. Oh, I bet.
I've had a few clients on Oprah's favorite things, and it's a whirlwind what it can do for our brands.
So really? I guess that's my question is if they start to see like a really big pickup from either Oprah's favorites list or any kind of just publication, or maybe like a celebrity posts about it on their Instagram or something, I don't know, and they get this really, really big push. Do you ever find that these brands sometimes get like overly excited about this rapid growth and then just forecast the rest of their business based off of those accelerated numbers? And is that kind of like a dangerous thing to do?
Yeah, it can certainly be a challenge. We've had clients on Good Morning America. We've had clients on Shark Tank, as well as Oprah's favorite things. And when we do our forecasting for them, we typically do show like after the dust has settled. So after the crazy, in the case of Good Morning America, that 24 to 48 hours. In the case of Shark Tank, it's more like 72 hours. And then they do the reruns, which is also, you always see a little blip on the sales chart there. But, it's what I'll say is in that period, the marketer who's ever running the show there needs to be on their game to make sure that they're capturing every sale possible by one, having inventory available for purchase, which is really, really hard to forecast. Years ago, I think it was a Tim Ferriss podcast I listened to where he interviewed the founder of Death Wish Coffee, and he had won this lottery to have a Super Bowl ad. And at the time they were a smaller company, and they just did everything possible to try and have the inventory available and that their website wasn't going to break down. And these PR pushes sound amazing in context, but in reality, sometimes they can be a bit of a nightmare, because what your company would normally do in, say, a 3-month or 6-month period, you now have to squeeze into a few weeks sprint, and it's all hands on deck. But yeah, I mean, most of the businesses I've worked with, they're usually quite realistic in what that lift is going to look like. And I'm sure a lot of that comes from advisors and investors who've seen these things before, who keep them a little bit more grounded in the realities of it.
Okay, because I could just see them getting really excited and buying all this inventory, and then if it's a flop, then you're just like stuck with a bunch of coffee or socks or whatever it is. Yeah.
It's definitely scary. I mean, that scenario is very real. I think where I have seen this a little bit is more so with influencers, where a brand will work with one influencer who just does amazing at driving sales. And then they start to make investments with additional influencers, and there's not that same return. And then that's when the planning and the energy shifts a little bit of like, wait, this isn't this fountain of new customer acquisition that I thought it would be. How are we going to get back to what we had forecasted based on that one initial test?
And I know you have a question, Francois, but I have one more question. It's a silly question.
Yeah, go for it.
You are going to be the closest person that we know to this. Does Oprah actually like all the things on her list?
I will say they have a full team, and Oprah's Favorite Things actually has a partnership with Amazon. So what I can tell you is that if you are a brand and you're a part of that program, you are required to sell on Amazon during the holiday months. And I know this because I've had Oprah's Favorite Thing brands come to me end of October being like, hey, we need to be live in 2 weeks on Amazon. Can you help us?
Sure. No problem.
But the great part is then we have like the Amazon Oprah's Favorite Things rep who's there to like help expedite any issues. And there's a whole team to make it come to life. But do I know if she handpicks them all? She has a team for that.
She has a team. Yeah, she's important. She's giving away cars every show and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, when you're that big, you have a team for everything. I'm sure she has a team of who chooses what groceries go in her house and what clothing she wears. I mean,
and whenever people are like, I'm going to do Oprah's morning routine, and she spends like however long meditating and however long like sipping coffee and reading, I'm like, yeah, y'all, because she doesn't clean her own house. And that's not a slight on Oprah, but she's not like, we're a bunch of peasants in comparison. So we can't do her routine and have jobs.
Yes, exactly. I think the reality is all these people who appear to have their quote, whatever together.
You can say shit together.
Oh, I can say shit together. Okay, cool. I was just making sure.
Yep.
They have staff to support them. Like I'm building a vegetable garden, and I had a relative this weekend who was like, are you doing this all yourself? I go, absolutely not. No, I have a gardener who's helping me with this, who's teaching me along the way. And I had like a handyman actually build the garden beds.
Nice.
I go, I have too much on my plate. I have a 1.5-year-old. I have, a little business I'm running. only 40 employees to manage. It's no big deal.
Yeah, I saw 65,000 SKUs under your belt right now.
Yeah, I mean, not under my belt, under the team's belt.
Under the team's belt, yeah.
I don't touch all of that, but yeah.
65,000 SKUs in a vegetable garden, and
a vegetable garden.
Still got time for us.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
Yeah, well, I did have a question. We're starting to, or at least you touched on sort of the holidays, and I know we're very far out, but I always feel like we're never too far out, right?
Never.
I always feel like the conversation happens
I mean-
right after Chinese New Year ends, and then everyone's starting to think about Christmas even.
I mean, we
Yeah.
kind of started promoting it like this time last year,
That's
getting
true.
ready for
Yeah.
everything, or 2 years
For
ago, whenever
especially
that
for
was.
Chinese New Year, getting those
Yeah.
inventory orders ready before that.
Mhm.
Are you noticing any companies prepare for things like Prime Day and the holidays now, starting, I guess, at the end of May?
Prime Day prep has absolutely begun. That's been going on. I think really prep started in March for some
March.
businesses
Hmm.
because it's in July. They haven't confirmed
Right.
the date, but I think it's going to be like July 11th or 12th. It's usually the week after July 4th, which
Mhm.
really can be a nuisance for agencies or Amazon brand managers where you're like, you know, you want everyone to have this relaxing July 4th, and then you come back and you're like, game time, and it's
Yeah.
very intense. But I guess better, you know, we'll take the July lift in sales. Holiday, that's always a plan. And where I always see holiday getting the most stressful is with businesses, especially last year, because you know they had their 2020 numbers and they still wanted to beat their 2020 e-commerce numbers.
Mhm.
And they're like, what do we need to spend? What do we need to do
Right.
in Q4 so that we can hit X number to appease our investors, our board, or our CEO, etc. So what's on my mind is like, okay, how can we really continue to push on sales now so that we're pacing towards that annualized goal, and that it's not as much of a like hot kettle to try and get that amount in a 2-month period at the end of the year.
Mhm.
But supply chain, like they've been planning for Q4, like you said, since Chinese New Year, maybe even before then. And I think the other elephant in the room right now too is just what's going to happen with the economy. You know, the
Right.
S&P was marked on Friday as being down 20%, officially making it a bear market. How is that going to impact consumer spending? I think Q3 is going to be really tough. I think it's going to start to lighten. Q3 is always a lighter period for retail, but I wouldn't be surprised if some businesses see their Q3 being down this year compared to last year. But at the end of the day, consumers are still going to be spending. I'm not a big fan of these like doomsday articles, maybe because I'm a Libra and I have too much optimism naturally. But, you know, consumers may curb their habits and how they spend, but at the end of the day, Americans are addicted to consumerism and materialistic items. And with social media and the glamorous life people like to portray, I don't think, you know, are people going to be spending tens of thousands of dollars on home renovations? Probably not. But I do think Amazon and e-commerce are still in a good place.
Mhm. More than likely, especially now that so many people depend on it for just like delivery of their essentials, honestly.
Everyday life. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and honestly, like I think what the Fed's doing is what they need to do. Like inflation does need to slow down. And there's this really interesting predicament with businesses, especially on Amazon right now, of how do I raise my prices? Because it's whether it's brands within the Amazon ecosystem, like all looking at each other like, well, I'm not going to raise my prices first because Amazon's algorithm doesn't like when you raise prices. And whether it's proven or not, or if it's direct, if their algorithm directly correlates price to how you rank, your click-through rates will be lower and your sessions will be lower, which absolutely are a part of Amazon's algorithm. So, you know, Target and Walmart also had really tough earnings reports. Like Target got hit massively. If you go look at their stock right now, it's, you know, not doing so well. And part of it is that, you know, they kind of absorbed some of the increase in costs, but didn't really raise the prices for customers. Another big thing that hurt a lot of them talking about inventory planning is they over ordered on things like mask and hand sanitizer. And guess what? Hand sanitizer expires. So then these retailers and brands who are selling sanitizer, they had to dispose of all of that. But anyways, this is kind of like my inflation rant. Like inflation does need to slow down. Like pricing does need to regulate. Otherwise, the only one who's going to be making money is Amazon, as they take their 15% referral fees and their advertising fees to sell these products.
And fulfillment costs.
I don't think Jeff's worried about anything. I think he's
well, I forget. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but like I think it's like the top 10 most wealthy people in the world lost like $1 trillion this year or something. Based on like stock values. I the article.
I'm sure they're still fine.
I don't doubt that. Yeah,
they're fine. But
I was about to say, I don't know if I have that much sympathy. Yeah, they're fine.
The market is definitely weird. How are you seeing? I know you mentioned that, for example, the clients that you're working with now, you're sort of set at this high expectation level of competing even with 2021 and the earnings that they had then. How are you seeing companies sort of adjust their expectations versus 2021? Is there like an average that they expect to maybe dip and overall still have a net increase from 2020?
Resetting expectations is a very fun part of my job.
Conversations, I'm sure.
And honestly, I think a big part of that is just pulling a lot of the macro trends, like showing if there's a decline in searches, trying to look at competitor comps to see if those businesses are also growing. But I mean, in general, all of our clients are still up on the year. And are pacing to have better years than last year. But I do know that, sales are slowing a bit after the massive growth that we had last year and the year before. But I think the reality will solidify resetting some of those expectations. But once again, I do think that it's the people actually executing on the work that feel the most pressure in a lot of ways. Like I mentioned, those brand managers or those e-commerce managers or marketing managers who are trying to juggle and figure out all of these various fire drills. And yet they still have to hit this crazy growth goal when they're maybe just trying to keep the business afloat.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's it's interesting to see that they're still growing over last year. Do you expect that to slow down going into next year? Like, I guess at what point should they start to set those expectations? At a marketing level or at a lower level, I'm sure they're already setting those expectations. But once you start to trickle that up, when are they going to start to have those conversations?
Yeah, well, and the other thing that I like to set expectations with for our clients is, you either have to commit to market share growth or growth on your profit margin. And, once a client gets to a more mature part or like a mature phase of their Amazon business, let's say they've been proactively selling on Amazon for 3 to 5 years, then, you really should be optimizing for profitability at this point, because if you've been proactive for this long, like you should have good SEO in place, you should have really good review moats, and you should have really good optimized creative. And now it's making sure that your advertising is efficient. You still should be keyword exploring and doing some keyword harvesting. But like, do you need to be going after the most expensive keywords if you're already there organically? Maybe not, depending on how that impacts your bottom line. And I do think that, like anything, there's the winners and there's the third, fourth,
losers.
fifth, and sixth losers. Yeah.
The not winners.
and I think another big thing is I do think that there is going to be a little bit of economic slowdown, but I do think that we'll recover fairly quickly. I don't think that this is going to be like a long drawn out recession. And a lot of people are afraid of the R word, the recession word, but the reality of it is it's just no growth or slight decline. It's not like, there's stocks in the market right now that are down 90+%, but it's not like the economy is going to drop 90%. And I feel like it's those crazy headlines that really scare people. And from a sustainability perspective, it's good for us to kind of level out a little bit and get situated and let the supply chain catch up to where we are and let the inflation come down a little bit. That, hopefully majority of businesses survive. There may be some businesses that don't. But I just think things have been too crazy between the talent market and being a business and trying to hire people and some of the crazy salaries that have been thrown out for someone with like 2 years experience. You're like, well, this Gen Z has never seen a recession before. Just kidding. But I just think that there's some reality checks on the horizon, but in the long term, we should all be in a better place because of it.
And are you noticing anything when it comes to inventory planning? I know, forecasting is not fun, but are you noticing that companies are ordering more inventory to store here in the US to just keep up with in case there is any spike in demand, or are you noticing that they're sort of keeping on with doing what they used to do, which is more of that just-in-time inventory tracking and planning?
Honestly, some businesses have evolved where they're doing those bigger bulk buys, shall we call them, and then there are the just-in-time. At the end of the day, like being able to do those bulk buys, you have to have the capital. And if you're bootstrapped or a growing business, even if you're VC funded, you may not have the capital because you have to allocate certain capital to inventory and other capital to salaries and additional capital to actual ad dollars and marketing cost. So the larger, more stable companies, I do see that, those that have money in the bank, right? And then those that are high growth companies, I think they're just trying to keep up with it. As a marketer myself, I'd rather spend more money on acquiring new customers than sit on 6 or 8 months worth of inventory.
Yeah. Right.
One thing I have seen though is businesses, instead of bulk buying the entire product, let's say they know that they get their packaging in China. And China is still, catching up on everything. They'll go and bulk buy their packaging and sit on that. But then they still have the product actually being manufactured at their normal rate. Or like if there's certain parts to their product, they'll bulk buy that. Just as a way, I'm sure, as a way to balance cash flow. Because also, should we go into a little bit of an economic slowdown, cash is king. Getting money now, whether it's from investors or the bank, now that interest rates are up, is only going to be harder. So that's also another tricky variable of fighting with the supply chain and making sure that you have enough, but also making sure that you have runway in your business so that you don't ever have to lay someone off simply because you can't afford them.
Yeah, sitting on packaging sounds like the smarter of the things to be sitting on, because like you said, these products expire. Well, and even we've talked about this before. Those roll-up foam mattresses, they expire just sitting there, which is wild to me. I mean,
I didn't know that. Oh gosh, I hate to think how many end up in landfills. I really hope that someone comes up with a business plan to help with all of the product that just gets disposed. Everyone talks about food waste, and that's a very real thing, as well as I look at my giant pile of compost for my vegetable garden. But there's, especially in apparel and CPG, like there's so many things that just get destroyed. They say destroyed because it makes you think that it disappears, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
And, how can those products potentially be repurposed and not just end up in landfills? But I live in Western Massachusetts now, so I'm turning a little crunchy over here. And I've always had an interest in sustainability and helping the environment. But I always cringe a little bit when we have to send product to being destroyed, because I just know, it hurts of like these. Not only was it the resources that went into this, but now it's likely just going to sit there and cause a mess.
Yeah. We'll eventually get to that reverse logistics and supply chain where we're going to have to figure out what to do with all that. I imagine Amazon has their eye on something. I could only hope that they, with them owning so much of the downstream supply chain, that they will eventually own the reverse side of it, because they're funding a lot of it through just their platform and their ease of use and their next day delivery and having everything imaginable on a single platform. I mean, it's crazy, right? Just the past 20 years. And you had a conversation on that yesterday, right? With the history.
Yeah. Well, so I once a semester, I do a guest lecture at FIT for their, I guess it's a well mix of majors, but mostly like their business fashion majors, on just the history of Amazon and how it got to be where it is today. And most of the class knew that Amazon started as a exclusive seller of books, but there were a few that did not know that.
Okay.
And I think what a lot of people who aren't within the Amazon ecosystem don't realize is just the difference of the wholesale model, the traditional 1P retail model, and then the marketplace model. And that it was really the marketplace model that was able to help Amazon propel to being the leader within the ecosystem. And one of the big things that helped Amazon bypass eBay was the invention of the buy box. Because, when you go on eBay, you can search for, iPhones, let's say, and there's all these different sellers that are selling iPhones, where if you search for an iPhone on Amazon, there's one listing, and then there can be multiple sellers competing. And just that one user experience, I think, was a huge advantage for Amazon. And then, they invented Prime and all these other things kind of fell into place.
Well,
and it's fascinating. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I have a silly question. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, have we ever seen with Amazon, within Amazon's lifetime, I guess, of having online retail and their strong online retail presence, have we seen this type of economic downturn, and how have sellers reacted if we have seen it at that time?
Well, I've heard from other sellers and other businesses that 2008, 2009 wasn't as tough of a experience than a lot of what other industries experience. But, it really wasn't until 2014, 2015 that Amazon really, I feel like, took off in becoming a part of every household's shopping addiction. And, I think it is going to be really curious to see what happens. We all want our magic ball, but I do think that Amazon and just e-commerce sales in general will be less hit than some of the other service businesses out there. You think of, like, what are you going to choose? Like having a cleaning lady come once a month, or the products that you order on Amazon? And, most people are going to say, like, well, I'll just clean my house myself, because that's something that they can do themselves. Who knows if they enjoy it or not, but you can't produce those products yourself. And if you read into the inflation reports, one of the industries that actually experienced the most inflation was travel. And my heart goes out to all of those in hospitality and travel and air and everything else, because I think they're up for some more volatility after just surviving the crazy COVID volatility because everyone's pent up. And I think the inflation in travel happened because everyone wants to get out and they are craving these experiences beyond their home that we've all been stuck in. But as that gets more expensive, and that's where there's a large amount of inflation, and if people start to get worried about spending money, I even remember as a kid, like when there was economic hardships, like there were no family vacations,
right.
But there were other things that we would still be purchasing.
The smaller things. Well, and again, back to my silly question, because you had mentioned the speaking engagement at the school, and they asked you about the stuffed bunny on the couch. That's not going to be my question. Mine is the globe behind you the Mad Men globe that's also a bar?
No, it is not. So my mother-in-law,
awesome.
I love her, and she volunteers at a recycling center twice a week. And every time she comes to my house, she has goodies. Sometimes great goodies, other time goodies that also go back to the dumpster. So that was a surprise from my mother-in-law at one point.
Very cool.
It looks great. It looks like something that you'd see at like Anthropology or something.
I know. And she got that for free from the recycling center.
Yeah.
Well, it got put to good use, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Laura, thank you so much for your time. We are near the end of our hour, but we do want to give you an opportunity to kind of let folks know where to find Envision Horizons. And also, what does a best fit client look like to work with you guys?
Absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I accept invites or connections or whatever. I think of myself as quite approachable. And then you can learn more about Envision Horizons at envisionhorizons.com. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. We're throwing out content on a weekly basis, sometimes multiple times a week. And then in terms of the perfect customer, we're releasing this software piece, which is really for brand managers and founders that are selling on Amazon through Seller Central. And then for our agency, we're really looking for businesses that are on pace or already doing about $2 million a year on Amazon exclusively. So we really strive to bring forth a solution for both those businesses that are getting there and then those businesses that are at like 1.5, 2 million and they want to be a $5 to $10 million business.
Gotcha. And
on Amazon.
On Amazon.
Yeah.
And then you guys exhibited at the Prosper show, right?
We did. Yes.
Or will you guys be at any of the upcoming shows? Because it seems, I know that like events season never kind of ends for this industry, but it seems like there's a lot of stuff kind of coming up. So any plan?
There is. We're kind of holding tight for a bit. We had done Prosper as a pre-launch kind of introduction of the My Horizons tool.
Okay.
It's finally launching on Thursday. We keep having revisions, so it's coming. And yeah, we'll see. We're figuring out what we're going to do. Now that we're a fully remote company, we're actually doing an all company offsite at the end of August, early September. And I feel like every conference I'm learning of right now is now in September, and it's just too much. So we'll see. Yeah, I was looking at e-tails in Boston, but I like to play it by ear.
Okay. Well, we'll see you next year at Prosper, if nothing else, for sure, yes. Right?
Absolutely.
Because everybody's got to go to Prosper. If you don't go to Prosper, what are you doing with your life?
Do you even exist? Right?
Are you even in the industry? Exactly.
Well, awesome. Well, great chatting with you both, and hope to stay in touch.
Absolutely, Laura. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. If you guys liked what you heard, please be sure to give us a thumbs up, comment with your thoughts, share this episode with your friends, subscribe to the show, and be sure to turn on those notifications. And that way you never miss a conversation with leaders in supply chain and e-commerce like Laura Meyer with Envision Horizons. And thank you so much again. And we'll talk to everybody very soon. Bye, y'all.
Bye, guys.